Welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast, a podcast from the home of Scrum. In this podcast, we feature professional Scrum trainers and other Scrum practitioners sharing their stories and experiences to help learn from the experience of others. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast. I'm your host, Dave West, CEO here at Scrum.org. Today's a pretty great podcast, I have to say. I've got a fantastic guest, and it's about a topic that I think that everybody is thinking about, worrying about, and is concerned about. So today's podcast, we're talking to Marjolein Pilon, an Agile coach and Scrum Master from the Netherlands, about how she employed Scrum to empower the team she was working with to fight climate change. Climate change, I know, a big topic. I actually was introduced to Marjolein via one of our professional Scrum trainers, and he said, "Oh gosh, this is a really interesting topic. You can give some amplification to it at Scrum.org." And we got talking via email and the like, and we actually produced a blog together that actually made me sort of step back from some of the things we were doing at Scrum.org and actually ask some questions, which is always good. Hey, I'm not necessarily sure we got the right answers, but we're still working on that. But at least it made me think. So welcome to the podcast, Marjolein.
Thank you very much, Dave.
And it's great to have
Thank
you
you.
here. Okay, so before we jump into this absolutely huge topic of climate change and how we can, as Scrum teams and as Agile professionals, make an impact every day. Tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're speaking to us from.
Yeah, so thank you very much for having me on this podcast. My name is Marjolein Pilon. I'm a Scrum Master from the Netherlands. I live here in the center of the country in a small village with my husband and my 2 children. My son is 5 and my daughter, she just turned 4. So yeah, really having fun with our small family. I've been a Scrum Master for about 5 years now, working mainly in the financial industry. And before that, I have been a business analyst, business engineer in Scrum teams as well. And even before that, I was an account manager in IT. And maybe a fun fact, I studied cultures and languages of Africa. So that was something like completely different, but then
Wow,
I
that
ended
is
up
a
in
different
IT.
one. And then, yes, and then like so many of us, we end
Yes.
up in this world, which is interesting. And yes, I have a 7 and a 10-year-old, so I know I can appreciate the small family vibe at the moment and the chaos and fun that creates.
Absolutely.
So climate change is going to be so easy compared to that. I get it.
Oh.
So okay. So before we get into the details of exactly how you employed Scrum to encourage people to think about the climate, can you tell me why you even started on this journey at all?
Yeah, well, I must say that climate change has been bothering me for the past like several years. And I did some things. We put like solar panels on our roof and stuff like that. But I think that most things that I did, they felt so insignificant compared to the magnitude of climate change. And yeah, that frustrated me. And I was just like, oh, what can I do? But it was also really coming from a place of fear. I don't know if you recognize that, and I think many people have that, it's just so big and it's just like also fearful for most people. And then I really had to work through that for myself. And it made me realize that when I come from a place of opportunity instead of fear, that I can do so much more. And that opened up like a creative energy or something. Yeah. So, and then I realized, why don't we in our Scrum teams do something about this? And I started this conversation at work, and people really liked the idea. And I read something on the internet about seeing the planet as a stakeholder. I don't know if you know Jutta Eckstein. She's German. She's also doing things with sustainability. And on her website, there was something about sustainability survey, and she also said something about we should identify the planet as a stakeholder. And that really hit me. And I was like, yeah, that's what we are going to do. And then I talked about it at work. And people were really like, wow, that's a great idea. So, and that made me think maybe we can really do something with this. I started with a planet retrospective with my team. And then we talked about the sustainable engineering principles, and we didn't know anything about that and was really new to the team and also really far away from our bed show. But it opened the discussion, and it also opened a new paradigm. And then the team was like, yeah, we don't know so much about this, but we really need to do something against climate change. And if we do something, we may reduce our footprint by maybe 10%. That was their estimate at the time. And that is actually how it started.
Wow, that is it is interesting. So from that place of fear and inaction, you felt sort of unable to make an impact,
Yeah.
right? You'd done some stuff on your home, and then it then led you to, well, hang on a minute, the art of the possible, right? That's what Scrum is all about, the art of the possible.
But the fun thing is that I also had to do some inner work before I could actually bring it in the world, you know. I really had to go through my own fear myself before I could actually find that creative energy.
That is super interesting. And then when you found that creative energy, you shared it with the team. And I love the idea of the planet as a stakeholder. I think that's a really interesting concept. Often in sprint reviews, we try to invite some stakeholders, but actually having a proxy for that very important stakeholder, which is the environment, the planet that your product is being delivered into, can help challenge that review, that increment, the work that you're doing, and actually put you towards, doing other things that you wouldn't necessarily have thought about. What was when you took that to your boss, though, when the team was excited, so I'm sure over bitterball and beer, you've talked about it with the team, and then they were like, yeah, that's really cool. Let's look at these engineering principles. Let's start thinking about the planet as a stakeholder. What happened when you started talking to your boss or the other stakeholders to the team?
Well, interesting that you asked that. It was actually another team that I did the retrospective with. They took it to our boss themselves. So they came with a few ideas, and they wanted to decommission a test environment that they no longer used. And they set up a meeting with our IT lead themselves. And the IT lead, he really liked the idea, and he also really liked the motivation. He hadn't never thought of that before in a sustainability way, but and he gave the team the trust that they can decommission this without any problems, or with keeping everything going. And they decommission it without any problems.
It is it's funny, you just, slight aside, talking about test environments. I remember at a client I was at many years ago, they had thousands of test environments all running all the time. And somebody said, do we need all these? Because it's much easier to add than to take away. And that's true in computing in general. In software development, it's much easier to add new features to remove old features. So the amount of debt, as it were, the amount of energy that's being created or being used, sorry, every time is huge. So it's interesting you started on that.
There is so much waste.
Yeah, and obviously waste has many impacts. It obviously, the environment is one of them, but it also has other positive. The less stuff around, the less stuff goes wrong, the less stuff you have to deal with, the less stuff that is unsecure, the less stuff. So it being conscious of Mother Nature and having her as a stakeholder also can potentially have impact on other things as well.
Absolutely.
Which is good. Okay, so So we did this Planet Earth retrospective. You identified these engineering principles. They took it to the boss. Great. The boss went, yeah, let's start doing that stuff. Then what happened? When did you start sort of, you brought this to another team, right?
Yeah. So I brought it to another team, and then to another one, and then outside of our department, there were also teams who wanted to do this. So I went through it to the whole bank, and then when I announced my leaving last April, then I asked on our Yammer, our intranet, I asked, would there be any Scrum Masters or any facilitators interested in taking this over from me because I'm leaving? And then I hoped maybe 5 to 10 Scrum Masters would respond, but then there were over 100 Scrum Masters and facilitators who responded. So that made my last month at the bank quite busy, because I did quite some workshops for Scrum Masters and other facilitators, how to run this workshop. So then they continue at work when I left. And that was really cool, because they also all have like 2 to 3 teams, and they were all taking this to their teams as well. So I think really a movement started there.
I mean, building that community, empowering them to at least think about this stuff, to talk about this stuff, to feel like they can make a difference. It's the first step to change, right?
Yes, exactly. So what I really did in these workshops was to make the teams and to make them aware of their climate impact, because it always starts with awareness, right? And then point them into the direction of sustainable options, and then help them define the first steps, like what you would do in a regular retrospective. Just define the first actionable steps that you can take on in the coming sprint. So make it small, like small steps. I mean, climate change is so big that it is sometimes people just don't know what to do because it's too big. It makes them feel powerless, you know? But when you break it in small chunks and you see what is the first thing that we can do? What is the first? Do we have idle service running? Maybe we can switch something off. It's already good for the climate, you know? And yeah, maybe we can start measuring our footprint. If you run in the cloud, it may be quite easy to start measuring. Well, things like that.
Yeah, I think that the message that I got from working with you on the blog, and the discussions that we've had is really that it doesn't have to be big.
No.
It can be incredibly small. For something as small as, hey, we ran that workshop and we threw away all that paper at the end. Why did anybody make sure it went to the recycle thing? Or I know that sounds silly, but in our office, that actually, we have these trainer face-to-faces where if you get 30 trainers in the room, you use more post-it notes and those big sticky post-it, the ones that fill the wall. And you can imagine, I literally, it's like Christmas in our office, the amount of paper that's there, And just one very simple thing was we have a recycle thing and we have a normal trash thing. But the recycle thing is miles away. It's like the other side of the car park and you have to walk, and if it's raining, it's so easy to put it into the other. And just making sure that somebody puts it in the thing. I know that sounds silly and little, but it's
important
thing. It makes a difference.
Yes, it does.
And it really, really does. So that I think that was an interesting thing. I also think the other thing that we took from it was that we've tried a couple of times, and is this retrospective, having an element in your retrospective that brings up, that stakeholder that is the planet, that is Mother Nature. Yes. Just saying, hey, is there anything we can do? And that's led to some really interesting discussions about, we do these face-to-faces all over the world, and offsetting our flying,
yes.
Having a carbon offset, buying trees, love buying trees. That's one of my favorite things to do. because who doesn't like trees? Those sort of things are stuff. Only working with suppliers that have something on their website that explicitly says, little things that we just, slowly, as they say.
Yeah, small steps.
Small steps. So, all right. So you've now got this active community in the bank, driving this agenda, using the workshop that you built and evolved from that first team. What's next?
Yeah, great question. I don't know yet. What is next for me personally? What is next for the teams? Is two different things, of course. But I really believe that we should build a community of agile teams that are dedicated to reduce their carbon footprint and that are dedicated to find ways to enable life to thrive on this planet. Because isn't that what we really want? To enable life to thrive. I mean, that is something that is in danger now, but we still have a choice. Yeah, so what I envision is that we build a community of agile teams that really are committed to enable life to thrive and to reduce their carbon footprint in order to do that.
I'm in.
Awesome. So that makes two of us.
That makes two of us. So of course, yeah, it's a good place to begin. What about the cynics?
Yeah, what about the cynics?
You go to those. I mean, I don't think there's cynics that believe that the climate isn't changing. I think there's cynics that believe that their effort is worth have an impact, that they're like, yeah, that's great, but I mean, obviously you do get some cynics around the actual issue, but what about the cynics that are just like, it's not that they can't be bothered, they just think this isn't in their wheelhouse. It's like, I mean, it's similar to the same cynics that when you said, okay, we're going to bring testers and developers together back in, many years ago, they were like, no, that won't ever work. Why would we do that? That isn't how it, can't we just, it's not going to be very efficient. Wouldn't it be better if we that's not going to, that's not why we're being paid.
Yeah.
We're being paid to deliver, finance features for the bank, for instance, in your previous situation.
Yeah, I would say to the cynics, just wait and see. I mean, it's not a problem if they stand on the sideline and just wait and see if it works. But let's work with the people who really do want this, that are really hopeful about their endeavors and that they can really make a change. Because when we are together, I mean, we benefit more from 1,000 teams that do small things than one team that does something like imperfection. But I would say to the cynics, yeah, take small steps. In small steps taken together, we will have a massive impact.
Yeah.
You won't see it immediately. Maybe you won't see it at all. You won't see at all what your personal impact is. But this is about something that is bigger than ourselves. And if we believe in something that is bigger than ourselves, that is really powerful. And if we can believe and become hopeful about that we are able to make a better world together, yeah, who wouldn't want to join that?
Yeah, who wouldn't want to join that? I mean, that's very compelling. At the end of the day, my perspective has always been that hope is a really powerful, believing and hoping and striving are really powerful motivators. And I think if you can uncork that in a team or in an individual, if you can, align some passion to this, create this world of opportunity, I think amazing things can happen. I also think that ultimately, when I'm talking to cynics about not just about this, but anything, I tend to just paint a picture of a world where we're all contributing and where we've all got that. And and say literally what you just said, Marjolein, the wouldn't you want this?
Yeah,
Isn't
who
this
wouldn't?
just, who wouldn't want it?
Yes.
Those famous words, and then just get them enthusiastic. Obviously, beer and bitterball helps as well, but anyway.
And what I would also say is I've been there myself as well. You know, I know this feeling. I know the feeling of cynicism that it's not going to work what we do. But I think I wouldn't call myself particularly optimistic about like the state of affairs at the moment, but I would consider myself hopeful. And that is not the same thing. I mean, hope is something that makes you do the right thing, regardless of the outcome.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast, a much more popular podcast than this, with Bill Gates. And maybe that's why it's so popular, right? They have guests like Bill Gates on it, and he was talking about all the science. And he was talking about the science. He was talking about all what they've, the temperature increase, the Himalayan melt, all this stuff. And the interviewer said, how do you stay so optimistic? And he said, because we can solve any problem if we put our minds to it.
Yes.
Humanity is amazing, and all it just needs to be focused, and everything called
Yes.
goodness will happen. And it's my job to try to focus some people and sprinkle some money into it to make that happen. And I was it made me smile a little bit, because it is. It was interesting how his perspective, considering he has a lot more data than probably we have about the world, and a better understanding of it. Cool. So, final question. I know time's pressing, and we could talk for days about this and about ideas about how you can connect teams, etc. If you had one or two things to say to somebody that's listening to this podcast about how they could start the fire, no pun intended, I know there's all sorts of analogies there, but to encourage this change in their own organization, to do what you did in the bank, what would you say? What's the first, or one or two things that they should start with?
I think getting started with a low-hanging fruit, identify the low-hanging fruit in your team, really already reduces some small amounts of CO2 emissions, which is really good and empowering, because it makes people feel that they can have an impact. And I think what we really want is to make people feel they can actually do something. So I would say start the conversation in your organization. Start a conversation. You don't need to be a sustainability expert to start a conversation, and to start a Planet Retrospective, and just create the awareness on what they can do, and define the first steps and get started.
Just start. Yeah, the way you climb any mountain, the way you start any marathon is one step, right? And you
Yes.
just got to get going. Well, thank you for spending this little bit of time with us today. I
It
really
was
do
my
appreciate it.
pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Of course, now I feel infinitely more guilty about the lack of progress that I'm making on this. So now I've just instantly, we have a team face-to-face in a few weeks, and I'm now adding an agenda item in my head to that team face-to-face to run a little Planet retrospective with all the team and see what can come out of that.
Awesome.
So thanks for listening today. And thanks for Marjolein, in an inspiring podcast. Hopefully you all took away something from it. I mean, ultimately, tackling climate change is not an easy problem to solve, but we have an amazing community of Agile professionals throughout the world solving many complex problems. This is just another one that they really can. And I think start small. Remember, your contribution is not irrelevant. Every little thing helps. I think Marjolein really taught us that small change has big impact, and that Scrum is all about the art of the possible, which I'm super excited about. And thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. This is the Scrum.org Community Podcast. I'm your host, Dave West. If you did enjoy today, then there's many other podcasts in our series, all about really empowering individuals to change their world, to change their situation, to change their mindset. Thank you. Stay safe. Remember, anything is possible if you focus the right group of people on the right problem and give them the space to do it. Scrum on, everybody. Bye-bye.